Taiwan stands up to the World Health Organization. China wants Trump to lose the election. And Hong Kong is becoming a prison. This is China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Taiwan is standing up to the World Health Organization. The WHO is part of the United Nations, which pretends that Taiwan is not a country. That's why the WHO also pretends Taiwan is not a country, and officially refers to it as the Taiwan province of China. The Chinese Communist Party wouldn't have it any other way. But this has meant that during the coronavirus outbreak, the WHO lets the Chinese regime represent Taiwan, which is nuts. Taiwan's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Joanne Oh, said this week that only the democratically elected Taiwanese government can represent Taiwan's 23 million people in the international community. It's crazy that Taiwan isn't recognized. Taiwan has handled the CCP virus better than any other country, but it's generally not allowed to participate in WHO meetings. Back in December, Taiwan told the WHO about the mysterious new virus, but the WHO ignored them. WHO corruption has cost lives. And now, with a major annual meeting of the WHO coming up, the US is demanding that the WHO invite Taiwan. And the international community is also pushing for Taiwan's participation. Aside from Taiwan's diplomatic allies and the United States, officials from Canada, Australia, Germany, Japan, and Lithuania have also recently spoken out in favor of Taiwan's inclusion in the WHO. You tell them, Lithuania. The thing is, starting in 2009, Taiwan had been allowed to attend the WHO annual meeting as an observer. But that ended in 2017, after Taiwan's current president, Tsai Ing-wen, was elected and started standing up to the Chinese Communist Party. So until the world holds the Chinese Communist Party accountable, I think Taiwan has a better chance of being recognized by the WHO than the WHO. A Chinese economist with the Zhongtai Securities brokerage firm in China estimated that the coronavirus caused China's unemployment rate to skyrocket to 20.5%. That's 3 times higher than China's official number. Now that's a serious problem, but it's been solved by firing the economist, which just adds one more person to the unemployment rate. The Chinese Communist Party has been accused of not doing enough to stop the coronavirus early on. But there's one virus the CCP is eager to eradicate: the Hong Kong protesters, which they are now calling a political virus. The Chinese Communist Party's worst fear? That fighting for freedom is contagious. But if Beijing is calling Hong Kong protesters a political virus, they're in good company.
This week, a near-daily CCTV commentary attacks Pompeo for calling out China's mishandling of the coronavirus. One saying he is turning himself to be the enemy of humankind by spreading a political virus.
Wait, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is also spreading a political virus? I think China needs to find more creative people to staff the propaganda department. They're getting repetitive. Chinese state media keep attacking Pompeo because he keeps pushing a wild conspiracy theory. His theory is there needs to be an investigation to determine whether or not the CCP virus escaped from a lab. That's crazy. Investigating to find out the truth? Only absolute nutters believe you can't trust what the CCP says, which is why China has challenged him to show any proof the virus came from a lab. To which Pompeo said, the whole point is that we need to investigate to see if there is proof. So let us go into the lab to take a look around.
Look, we still haven't gained access, the world hasn't gained access to the WIV, the Virology Institute there. We don't know precisely where this virus originated from.
China is not letting the US or any independent investigation into the lab. After all, They know exactly where the coronavirus came from. The US military. I mean Italy. I mean France. Also the US. Again, specifically New Jersey. Yes, the Global Times agrees with Mike Pompeo. A thorough investigation is needed, as long as that investigation doesn't involve the lab in Wuhan that was studying bat coronaviruses. So, how are things in Wuhan, where the coronavirus definitely didn't start? Well, no one in Wuhan is complaining because they can't. They're being silenced. The Chinese authorities are clamping down as grieving relatives, along with activists, press the ruling Communist Party for an accounting of what went wrong in Wuhan. Lawyers have been warned not to file suit against the government. The police have interrogated bereaved family members who connected with others like them online. And volunteers who tried to thwart the state's censorship apparatus by preserving reports about the outbreak have disappeared. Disappeared? I wonder where to. In unrelated news, China has just launched a new rocket into space. Yes, that was a joke. Sadly, this next story is not. European Union ambassadors to China published a joint opinion piece in state-run China Daily. It was about how EU-China ties are vital amid this global crisis. And it was published on the 45th anniversary of diplomatic ties between the EU and China. Now, imagine these European diplomats' shock and dismay when they found out that China Daily, a propaganda outlet of an authoritarian regime, censored their opinion piece. Wow, who could have seen that one coming? But what was censored from this fawning piece about how great cooperation is between China and the EU? This sentence. But the outbreak of the coronavirus in China and its subsequent spread to the rest of the world over the past 3 months has meant that our pre-existing plans have been temporarily sidetracked. China Daily refused to publish it unless they removed the idea that the coronavirus started in China before it spread to the rest of the world. Other than that, this piece lavishly praised the mutual support of China and the EU during the coronavirus, saying things like, "That is how true partners act." Even in something as flattering as this, the Chinese Communist Party refused to leave in any mention of the fact that the coronavirus started in China. So, what did the EU ambassadors do? The EU delegation to China made known its concerns in no uncertain terms, but decided to proceed with the publication with considerable reluctance. In other words, they caved. And China Daily published the censored version in English, but did not publish it in Chinese at all, which they had originally agreed to do. So in summary, EU ambassadors to China wrote a nauseating op-ed in Chinese state-run media full of CCP propaganda about how the world needs to work together with China. Then, the Chinese regime bullied them into censoring the fact that the coronavirus outbreak started in China. And even after the EU caved, the Chinese regime still went back on their agreement. That's called win-win mutual cooperation. And stay tuned because China wants Trump to lose the upcoming US election, at least according to Trump. Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Donald Trump. The Chinese Communist Party will do anything it can to prevent him from being re-elected in November. And I have a very reliable source for that. Donald Trump. That's at least what he told Reuters in an exclusive interview. He said China will do anything they can to have me lose this race. This is not the first time President Trump has said this. Here he is at the end of April.
You have said that China is doing everything it can to make sure you don't get reelected. What specifically are they doing?
Well, China doesn't want to see me elected.
And this is from June last year.
I think if China had their wish, they'd wait till after the election. They'll pray that Trump loses.
Well, that's not true. communist officials aren't allowed to pray. Well, unless they're praying to the one true God. Now, of course, the Chinese Communist Party denies that they care about the U.S. election.
We have reiterated many times that the U.S. election is the U.S.'s own internal affair. China is not interested in interfering. At the same time, we hope the people of the U.S. will not drag China into its electoral politics.
Wait, Americans are dragging China into electoral politics? What does that mean? Well, welcome to the latest propaganda narrative of the Chinese Communist Party. A lot of people around the world are saying the Chinese regime must be held accountable for covering up the coronavirus, as well as things like hoarding medical supplies. Or as people in Western diplomatic circles say, bro, not cool. So now, the Communist Party is trying to paint calls for accountability as a cover-up by Republicans. Republicans, by the way, whose party they say is becoming far right. And also, it's to distract from the fact Trump has turned the U.S. into a failed state. So please don't drag China into American politics. The party's propaganda department is good at what they do. The Trump administration is now looking at putting new tariffs on China in retaliation for the coronavirus. And they're also looking for ways to move global supply chains out of China. This week, Matthew Pottinger, a senior White House advisor, delivered a speech in Mandarin about Chinese democracy. The cliche that Chinese people can't be trusted with democracy was the most unpatriotic idea of all. Taiwan today is a living repudiation of that threadbare mistruth. What a dangerous far-right view. Pottinger also spoke of the democratic ideals of China's 1919 May 4th movement, which according to my favorite state-run media, means he's totally wrong and should mind his own business. And nobody liked his stupid May 4th speech anyway. I didn't realize Global Times had such strong opinions about Star Wars. May the 4th not be with them. Also, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo couldn't help but drag China into talk about the U.S. elections.
We can confirm that the Chinese Communist Party did all that it could to make sure that the world didn't learn in a timely fashion about what was taking place, which is the way communist parties operate. This is classic communist disinformation.
Oh, the Communist Party did not like that. They've spent the last few weeks attacking Pompeo, accusing him of things like betraying Christianity with his lies. The Communist Party would know since they're an expert on betraying Christianity. It's clear the Chinese Communist Party does not like the Trump administration and their political hooliganism. But the real problem is the U.S. system. So remember, anyone suggesting that China had some role to play in the coronavirus outbreak and should be held accountable is a far-right, enemy of humankind Republican. But please, don't drag China into American politics. And coming up after the break, the CCP is busy in Hong Kong. Not so much fighting the coronavirus, but turning it into a giant prison. This is China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Well, it's been a long coronavirus lockdown. But hey, spring is here. The snow is melting, flowers are blooming, and protesters are returning to the streets of Hong Kong. Nature is glorious. May 1st was Labor Day in Hong Kong, and about 200 protesters gathered in the Sha Tin Mall for a sing-along protest. Police responded with pepper spray. In fact, about 3,000 riot officers equipped with tear gas, rubber bullets, and water cannons were deployed. Now that might seem like an overreaction to a sing-along, but nothing is more dangerous to an authoritarian regime than the power of song. After all, that's how David Hasselhoff single-handedly tore down the Berlin Wall. A truly great moment in history. But back to Hong Kong. It's been a year since Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam pushed a controversial extradition bill. That bill would have allowed the Chinese government to extradite Hong Kong residents for trial in mainland China, where justice is blind. Excuse me, where justice is blinded. Anyway, anger over that Hong Kong extradition bill led to protests, including a gigantic protest on June 9th last year, with more than 1 million people in the streets. As the protests continued week after week, Hong Kong police got more and more aggressive. Within a few months, protesters had turned their anger from the local government and Carrie Lam to the real power masters, the Chinese Communist Party. That was a big problem for the CCP. You know, it's not that they haven't dealt with student protesters before, but with international attention fixed on Hong Kong, their hands were tied this time. But then, a miracle happened. A deadly virus escaped from Wuhan, China, through no fault of the Communist Party, of course. You see, a bat sneezed on a pangolin in Wuhan, or possibly Italy. And also the pangolin was in the US military. So obviously, this was America's fault, just like the Hong Kong protests. Anyway, the CCP virus brought a temporary halt to the mass protests in Hong Kong, and international media had another focus.
It's not just that stores ran out of toilet paper early on in this pandemic, it's that there's been a total lack of supply.
And while we've all been fighting over toilet paper, the CCP has quietly turned Hong Kong into a prison. What? You expected them to be busy fighting the coronavirus? Over the past several months, the Communist Party has taken advantage of the shift in media attention from Hong Kong to the coronavirus. They've taken concrete steps to annihilate the Hong Kong protest movement. Now, technically, they had agreed not to do that. Hong Kong's basic law, essentially their constitution, guarantees Hong Kong gets to run separately from the rest of China until the year 2047. That's called one country, two systems. I know which of the two systems I prefer. But it's clear Hong Kong is already getting very close to one country, one system. Beijing has two main representative offices in Hong Kong. Those are the Hong Kong Liaison Office and the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office. And guess what? The two guys in charge of those departments during the protests last year? Well, they've been fired. The CCP has installed a new head of the Hong Kong Liaison Office, a guy named Luo Huining. Turns out he's very loyal to Chinese leader Xi Jinping. He helped lead Xi's anti-corruption campaign in Shanxi province. That's why he's got a reputation as a bit of an enforcer. Luo Huining has a record of using hardline tactics to resolve tough problems for the Chinese Communist Party. But every abbot needs his Costello, which is why Luo will be teamed up with Xia Baolong. He's been appointed as the new head of the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office. I think he'll do a really good job. His qualifications include toppling Christian churches. Yeah, like I said, he's very qualified. And Abbott and Costello here have already shown their hand. They've said they have supervisory power over the Hong Kong government. What does that mean? China's liaison office said the high degree of autonomy that the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region enjoys, including its legislative power, all comes from and is authorized by the central government. In other words, we made you, we can unmake you. That's a solid basis for any constitution. But since Beijing's offices in Hong Kong declared they had supervisory power in Hong Kong, they've been issuing statements criticizing the protests, like when they slammed shoppers' support for pro-democracy businesses as violating free market principles. Yes, people choosing where to shop is a terrible violation of the free market, says a communist government. Although these statements seem petty, the problem is they're normalizing the erosion of one country, two systems. But that's not all. The CCP has also been pushing a, quote, national security law. That national security law is called Article 23. It would prohibit any act of treason, secession, sedition, subversion against the Chinese government in Hong Kong. Now, if that sounds to you like they're trying to make it illegal to criticize the Chinese Communist Party, you would be right. That's why 500,000 Hong Kongers protested when the government first tried to pass it in 2003, which at the time forced the government to back down. But the CCP and the Hong Kong government have never given up on passing Article 23, and they've been talking about it more and more over the last year. Maybe the Communist Party is just getting to the point where they don't care about protests or keeping up any semblance of one country, two systems. And if you look at what's been happening over the past few months, it sure looks that way. In a single day in April, they arrested 15 pro-democracy leaders for participating in last year's protests. That included Martin Lee, an 81-year-old man who was guilty of being in a protest with 1.7 million other people. Ironically, back in the day, Martin Lee helped draft Hong Kong's basic law. But don't worry, Hong Kong police don't just target elderly people. Last year, they arrested a 13-year-old girl. So have authorities now effectively nipped the Hong Kong protest movement in the bud? Probably not. With cases of the coronavirus on the decline, Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam made the unfortunate announcement that Hong Kong will gradually begin opening up again. I say unfortunate because it was unfortunate for a leader so despised to make that announcement in front of a green screen. I mean, just imagine what internet users might do with that image or video if, say, we accidentally put a downloadable link in the description below this YouTube video. But this means we're likely going to see a new wave of protests hitting Hong Kong. Hong Kong police are already preparing. The force is also reassembling its core squad of 6,000 riot control officers to prepare for possible unrest on the two most politically charged anniversaries of the year, in June and July. Those are the annual protests on June 4th for the Tiananmen Square massacre, and July 1st, the anniversary of when the British government handed Hong Kong over to China in 1997, throwing Hong Kong into this mess. The U.S. is preparing as well. Last year, the U.S. Congress unanimously passed the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. Part of it was an annual review of Hong Kong's situation to see if it still really is autonomous from mainland China or not. The law says that if Hong Kong is no longer autonomous, the U.S. will then treat Hong Kong as part of mainland China, meaning it would be subject to the same trade tariffs on mainland China. That would hit the Hong Kong economy hard, and it's already dealing with a possible worst recession ever as a side effect of the coronavirus. And that might make Hong Kong's communist overlords a little nervous. The best way to scare a communist is to threaten to take away their money. So, maybe Senator Ted Cruz is right when he says Hong Kong is the new Berlin. Hold on. If Hong Kong is the new Berlin, does that make me Hong Kong's David Hasselhoff? What's that, Shelley? Only if I sing Looking for Freedom while standing above the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge? Challenge accepted. And that's it for this episode of China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.